Due to the following CBS School Break special, Magnum PI will not be seen today. It will be broadcast tomorrow in the regular time period.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
With Doctor Strange, I could really just embrace the earliest version of that character, which frankly looked like he was half English, half Asian in the way he was drawn in his first appearance. His eyes had a different kind of shape, and his whole aesthetic was really beaming the sense of Asian culture coming forward. But he also looked like a definitely much older guy, so I didn't hold back with that in the illustration. I'm somebody who likes to embrace age as a definitive characteristic that you can really get into much deeper character with somebody when you show more form and grit in the face. It's more shadow. It's more lines for the artist to hook into.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Time again for Word Balloon, the Conversation Show. John Suntress, you got to let me know if there's any sort of echo issue right now. Technical difficulties, as always, conspire against us. But I'm always happy to welcome Joe Casey back to Word Balloon. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you too, John. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We talked about this. We were going to get back together. Junior Baker starts in about a month. It's September 20th. And, we're happy to talk about the book. It's you and, oh, God, what is, now I'm blanking.
Ryan Quackenbush.
Ryan Quackenbush.
Yeah.
Very nice. Absolutely. I love his pseudonym. I'm assuming Quackenbush isn't a real name.
Oh, no, I think it's his real name. Who'd make up a name like that?
Oh, a big Groucho fan. You know. But no, man, it is great to see you. And this is another trippy book, man. Very conspiracy-related. And it's obviously a sequel to Butcher Baker.
Yep.
And we're seeing where the world is post Butcher Baker. And again, it's your meditation on superheroes and their importance. And this is a world where the superheroes have gone away. And describe Junior's, buddies and what his deal is into the story.
Well, he's sort of an internet tabloid journalist, and he's chasing the random stories about these. I mean, at this point, that's just sort of like weird phenomena, but they're all tied to superhero lore and the world that existed years ago. And as the series goes on, I mean, you kind of figured out in the first issue that he has a deeper connection to this world than just an interested reporter. It's, it's in his DNA, let's say. It's in his blood, so to speak. I mean, the title kind of gives it away, so it's not a big spoiler. But it's definitely a generational thing from the original series from 10, 12 years ago.
Well, Quackenbush's art is great because it's very surreal.
Yeah.
It fits this story. And it also, I think, represents, a taste of yours. I think to Automatic Kafka and he's doing it. And there's kind of there's a there.
Well, I'm a big fan of that sort of 80s experimental comics period where there was things like Electro Assassin and, Dave McKean coming onto the scene, John J. Muth, Kent Williams, the painted comics that were still mainstream superhero in nature, in substance, but these guys were going off on weird artistic tangents that were selling the material in a very unique way. And that stuff hit me at just the right age where, I was looking for new ways to express the same material. It wasn't, Electro Assassin isn't too far outside of Frank Miller's other Daredevil stuff. It's just seen through that Bill Sienkiewicz lens, which gives it a whole experimental, surreal attitude. And it really struck me. So quite often in my career, there's been projects where I've tried to tap into that influence and try to replicate that energy in some way. And luckily, finding Ryan, he was the perfect guy to illustrate this series. He did a great job.
It also conveys this surreal environment, something that Flicker is going through. What is real, what isn't, and the perception of reality. And he finds a way to get past the veil that I think most of us are kind of living through to find the real truth.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it. The other thing I kind of like about Ryan's work in particular, I mean, it's very collaborative. You notice in the crowd scenes, I don't think we're the first comic book to do this in the last year or two, but you see people in masks. It's definitely a post-pandemic comic. And I like that. I like that it exists in a place and time now that, we all went through, we all collectively experienced. It's there in the book,
100%. And also, I think it comments on what the real world is experienced, but also almost a reaction in this post-Avengers Endgame period of the superhero stories aren't satisfying us. And it for different reasons in the story, but I think almost there is meta sort of communication that you're giving us.
Yeah, there's some metatextual bits in there. I mean, the relevance of the concept of the superhero is something that we're dealing with. And, like we talked about last time, I dealt with that personally as I was coming up with this story and writing it. What do these superheroes that I grew up with mean to me as an adult now? And so, when it comes to things like those kind of concepts, I can't help but get metatextual. It's kind of, even if I couldn't stop myself if I tried. And again, it does sort of put the series in a time and a place. We're kind of in a very strange mode. And again, we talked about this last time too, about, the Marvel movies might not be as strong as they used to be. The DC movies certainly aren't as strong as we want them to be. And the series reflects that in a certain way. Hopefully, over the 5 issues, I think it does dive a little deeper into, what it means to be relevant for something to be relevant in our lives. What does it mean to us personally? And in Dizzy Baker's case, the lead character, again, it's in his blood. It's a DNA thing. It's a generational thing, and it's kind of right there on the first page. The visuals of the first page. He's not it will go on. The generations will go on, and what is he going to pass along to the next one? Based on what he learns in this story. So I mean, there's a lot of levels. It's probably the most personal thing I've written in years, and I feel like I left it all out on the field. It might be quite a while before I rip my guts out and put them on a page like this again.
Okay, a 5-issue miniseries. Yep. And it starts, first issue comes out September 20th. Is Final Order Monday?
I think Final Order cutoff starts Monday.
Okay.
So it's, Monday the 20, whatever the 28th is. I think it's the week of the 28th. So
yeah,
it's next week. Yeah. So I'm hoping, I mean, it's, there's a lot of comics out there. I hope people, give this one a try with retailers, give it a try. And, I'm really proud of it. And again, Ryan's art's kind of worth the price of admission alone. 30 pages of art per issue, 30 pages of story. So you get your bang for your buck on this one, I think.
Yeah, here's a great page that's a great representation of Ryan's art.
Yeah, he's crazy go nuts with his art. I love it.
He's crazy go nuts. That's a good way to that's a good way to describe it. But yeah, I mean, this again, it feels like a through line from Automatic Contact or even Wildcats 3.0 20 years ago. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it, John. We both kind of, in a way, make our livings dealing with subject matter that was built primarily for children. I mean, superheroes are ways to process collective information in a very simplistic and direct way. Perfect for kids. It was perfect for us as kids. It taught us things about the, basic values, good and evil, right and wrong, all that stuff. As we get older and life gets a little more complex, and as we lose our innocence just by being confronted by the realities of the adult world, we often, I find, have to reevaluate those things that meant something to us as children, and we still feel like they must mean something, but we don't quite know what. So I think, those of us who make this material and comment on this material and are invested in the existence of this material, we have to reckon with our own relationship with it every so often, every 10 years, every 20 years, whatever it is. Otherwise, we're going to stay in, I don't want to stay in a state of arrested adolescence. I want to be an adult and still find some value in this material. And that was sort of on a personal level, that's what this series was really all about for me, is finding the relevance again, finding a new relevance, finding a new energy in concepts that are never devoid of energy. It's just whatever age you're at, you've got to tap into it in the right way for the age that you're at. I don't want to get too complex with it, but it is a complex thing when you're, getting up there in years like we are, John, old men that we are. We're still looking at this material and finding things in it that still speak to us. So as a creator, I'm determined to keep injecting things that speak to guys of my generation and older and hopefully younger. But I definitely want to speak to people who have been through the history of comics in the way that I have in the last 40, 50 years,
I'm with you, man. No, definitely. It also reminds me of ideas that you explored a couple years ago in the All America comics.
Yeah.
And again, that line between reality, or what we see to be reality, and the higher.
Yeah. It's also interesting. I'm getting to the point where most of the characters that I create or write, even for the publishing, the publishing houses, are younger than me. And sometimes significantly younger than me, which, is both, a blessing and a curse as a writer. I have the perspective, but sometimes I don't have the insight, and so you got to work at being connected to those characters in a way that was easy for me 20 years ago. Now it takes a little more thought, a little more, I have to call it a different skill set to make a character like the one in All America Comics work. It doesn't just flow. I had to really think about that. And I thought about it with this character too, the offspring of a forgotten superhero. There's something to that I, in that relationship, I identify more with the parent than the child.
Sure.
So one of the ways that I connected to Dizzy Baker in the series is that I made him a father to be.
Yes.
That was one of the ways that I was able to connect with that character, even though I did create the guy.
Do you have a focus group of, your own kids? I am always reminded. I almost I taught for a semester, and I've the possibility has presented itself a couple of times since. And my friends who are teachers remind me that this generation of generate Gen Z, and, the generations under us, that they really have grown up in a post 9/11 world, post economy collapse of 2008, now COVID. And that their experience is so different than the world we grew up in when we were teens and 20-somethings.
Yeah. It's a totally different world, And I want to make sure. I mean, look, I don't know how many kids are reading comics these days, but I want to make sure that when they do, they recognize something of themselves in the material. Because I mean, the guys that were making comics when I was a kid, however they did it for me. So I in a way, that's always in the back of my mind to try to pay it forward to whatever random Gen Z is reading these comics. It's got to be something that otherwise we're done, because if we're not regenerating the audience on some level, even if it's a micro level, then sometimes I don't know why we're doing it.
Sure. Have you had a chance to talk to the stores directly and solicit your book to direct market stores? And what has their given you any good feedback of what they're looking for or what you're trying to do?
I mean, it's such a bizarre marketplace right now. I feel like retailers probably are having the same kind of, not a dilemma, because they find product that will sell to that audience no matter what. If it's not comics, it's manga or other merch or whatever. I feel a lot of kinship with retailers right now, because I feel like we're, again, of the same generation. I think the majority of the retailers that are out there right now that are really doing well are probably around our age. And they grew up on the same type of stuff and love the same kind of stuff we did. So when it comes to that aspect of the business, I'm hoping that whatever I do, whether it's my own stuff at Image or DC stuff, Marvel stuff, whatever I'm doing, that it's connecting with them, because they're like the front lines, of our industry. They're out there slugging it out every day. And I mean, man, I feel for them. I at least hope that even if my books, if my books aren't selling in huge numbers, at least I hope the retailers are, getting a kick out of them, at least.
No, I hear you, man. Dennis Huffman. Can't stay on, but man, Joe has such an awesome line of books with Zod and Dan McDade, Dutch with Nathan Fox, and now Junior Baker with Brian Quaker. Can't wait to pick up these books. At least connecting with Dennis.
Well, thank you, man. I'm coming back in a big bad way. I've been gone for a little while, and I got more material coming out that I know what to do with.
That's been great to hear, man. And also, talking to Siegel recently as well, another one of your Man of Action guys. I don't know what Joe Kelly is right now. If he's got any,
he's got a book. Joe Kelly's got a book out from Image called Immortal Sergeant, which is got I think another couple issues to come out. It's great. It's, drawn by the guy who did I Kill Giants with him. So
sure.
Yeah, Ken Damara. So we're all kind of starting to sequelize ourselves. We're that old, John, that we're starting to, either we're collaborating with old collaborators or sequelizing old material. It's inevitable.
Yeah, but it's good, man. You guys have this great track record of wonderful stories, and we'll get into you returning to the Superman universe with the Todd book in a little bit. But no, we've had the pleasure of talking about some of these books. In fact, I want to show you some of the covers, everybody, that Joe is soliciting at the back of Junior Baker here.
Yeah.
There's All American Comics and Jesus Freak.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. There's lots of ads in the back of my books of my other work.
But that's good, Joe. I mean, obviously, you got to remind people of what you got up there, man. I don't know if we talked about The Bounce. What was The Bounce?
One of my favorite things I've ever done is that book, The Bounce, drawn by Dave Messina, who's great artist, and there's 12 issues, and it really, again, it was about the nature of superheroes and alternate realities, and how we can alter our own reality, and I love that thing, and that cover is fantastic.
Oh yeah, my God, yes. In 1975, we talked about that last.
Ian McEwan, another great artist, and hopefully he and I will collaborate again soon. We've been talking about it. I love his stuff, and that was one of my favorites, actually.
Excellent. Here's the cover for Junior Baker, number 2.
Yep.
And let's see here. I had more. Well, yes, next. One of my favorite things.
Sex. Yes, I'm often asked, and and anybody who cares, I can reassure them. We're doing trades only on that series now, and it's just been. We haven't, there is another book coming eventually. It's one of those series that has become so big in its scope, so many characters and so many kind of different subplots and everything. It's the hardest thing that I have written in terms of keeping track of everything. So the next book is sort of in the planning stages, but it's going to be a while before I can kind of wrestle it to the ground. I mean, an issue of Zod I can write in a week, but an issue of Sex, it literally, it takes some time to get a chapter of that going.
It's a great series, man. No, I love it. Well, they made the announcement about the third book, and so people know. But tell us what you can about the series.
Well, they came to me and said, we want to make Zod a real bastard again. He's been a little too nice in the Superman comics since Rebirth started. And I said, I agree. He should be a bastard. He should be a bad guy. And so we're taking him through his dark night of the soul, as we join Zod at the beginning of the series. He's got his own planet. He's got a family. And I can tell you unequivocally, I've taken great pleasure in dismantling all of it. I've said it many times. This series is about bad things happening to bad people. And we're having a blast. And Dan McDade, a great artist that I've worked with before. He loves the Superman universe. He was born to draw something like this. And, it's a rare thing these days in mainstream comics to have 12 issues drawn by the same artist. I think we're going to go for it in this one. And it's going to be me and Dan for the first 12. And we're super, super psyched about it. It's going to be a lot of fun and very violent and deranged and twisted. And 20 years ago, I wrote The Pacifist Superman. And this is my penance. I'm doing exactly the opposite with Kneel Before Zod. He is the opposite of as opposite of a pacifist as you can get.
Are we going to see him in the Phantom Zone? Is that the plan, or is this a flashback?
No. This takes place present day. It sets Zod up as a character for hopefully something bigger down the line. I mean, look, the whole idea, the notion that it's no point in hiding it. We want Zod and Superman to throw down again. But to get to that place, Zod has to go through his own journey, and his character has to be kind of set up for that kind of confrontation. And that's my job here, is Dan and I, to set him up for that confrontation.
Have you been working then in concert with Josh Williamson and Philip Kennedy Johnson and what they're doing?
Well, we had a sort of a conference call a couple months ago where we all kind of shared what we were going to do and see how we dovetail together. And it was a very productive call. Those guys are very cool. And the Superman line, to me, is very reminiscent in terms of its cohesion as it was when I was writing it. And it was me and Jeff Loeb and Joe Kelly and Mark Schultz. And we were very closely, it wasn't week-to-week continuity, but we were very much in lockstep on what each other was doing. And it was a very focused line of books. And I feel like, that's what's going on now with the Superman title. So hopefully Kneel Before Zod is only going to add to that, because we're taking the steps to make it feel cohesive and make it feel like a part of the universe.
Well, B. Graham is excited for the book. And unfortunately, Caesar and Jay Gomes are telling me that there is an echo on my audio. Unfortunately, it's coming from Joe's side, and I've been able to figure out that much. What I can't figure out is how to eliminate it. So I'm going to speak as little as possible and let Joe carry the load. Because you also have what Joe has got coming up and what he's got to say about not only the current books, but also already got a list of questions about some of Joe's greatest hits.
Bring them on. I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, cool. Rudy has a question about Ben 10.
Okay.
He said, I know that the 44-minute episodes for Ben 10 were intended to be the series finale. Is that really it for Ben 10, or is there a possibility for more?
Well, I mean, I can say this: it's never meant to end. This thing is a juggernaut that cannot be stopped. It's like it's one of those evergreen properties now. It's been around for 15 years. It's gone through many iterations. In fact, here's a little story about Ben 10. We were in a meeting. This is about 6 years ago, and we were starting on the last iteration. And we were in a big meeting with a lot of different sort of department heads, and they were explaining the marketing plan and how the series we were working on was going to fit into the overall scheme of things. And there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of merchandising arms and things like that. And I said, excuse me, I have a question. If our show tanks, does that affect any of this architecture that you're building here for the next 5 or 6 years? They said, no, not at all. And I said, you're welcome. So it's bigger than any of us. It's bigger than the creators. I mean, it's just, so the next form that it appears in, I can't really say, but it's never off the radar ever, because it's just too big of an IP now, which boggles my mind. I never expected to get as big as it did, but it's the gift that keeps on giving. So for any Ben 10 fans out there, rest assured it will return in some way, shape, or form. So don't worry.
Is the old episodes, or are they one-man maps?
I mean, are they? I don't know. I mean, I haven't kept up with. I assume they're on HBO or Max now.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I haven't really checked.
Okay. And Joe, I know that your writing primarily has been in comics and animation, and we're in the midst of the Writers Guild, different guild than the animation guild, correct?
Yeah, I mean, animation carries on, but I mean, we all stand with our fellow writers. I mean, we believe 100% of what they're doing, and there have been moments in the animation side where they would try to set us up in a meeting, and we would say, no, we're not crossing the picket lines. So we support it in every way that we can, and I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight after yesterday, what we heard yesterday. But I think that the fight is definitely worth fighting, because these are important issues that will benefit not just writers of this generation, but generations to come. So it's painful for everybody, but I feel like it's got to be done.
You're not alone. I have all my friends in the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild that feel the same way. I know directors who are kind of mad at the Directors Guild for capitulating, accepting the deal right at the beginning of the writers' strike, and feel that there would be more weight if that guild as well stood with the writers and the actors.
Yeah, that was disappointing of the DGA, their decision. I mean, people got to do what they got to do, but it was very heartening when the SAG struck as well. That's a big deal, because those guys can go out there and sell it better than any writer could. We can write their speeches for them, but they can deliver them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hearing Fran Drescher, speak out, and hearing Bryan Cranston speak out, that was not only important but inspiring. And hopefully they're selling it to the people out there who are wondering what this is all about. Well, why are we not going to get new shows? Why are we not going to get new films right away? These actors are able to explain it in a way that cuts right to the heart of it. So, we're really grateful that they stepped up and joined us in the strike.
In my conversations with actors, I've discovered that a lot of the old business models for live action have disappeared. International syndication has been replaced now with streaming. and that's just one example. But in animation, you know, good Lord, when you started Ben 10, it's still Saturday morning cartoons. And that doesn't exist. You know, yeah, and I mean, I know this Cartoon Network, and I know that a lot of streamers are also taking animation. But yeah, can you talk to how the business has changed and what you're playing with now with new projects?
Well, how the strike does affect animation is if you are using voice actors in SAG, you know, and I mean they're not working right now, so you know that's one aspect that in shows in production it really does affect them. You know, the model is, you know, it's changed in a similar way to every other kind of show with streaming and all that kind of stuff. The thing that's really affected the animation side of things, obviously, and this has less to do with the issues involved in the strike, but they're still relevant in sort of a cultural sense, is that the CP side of things has evolved in such a way that, you know, for shows like Ben 10 that have a what we call the boys action genre, the boys action demo.
Yeah.
There's usually a serious merchandising component to it. But when there's no more toy stores, you know, when Toys R Us closes up, that's a huge blow to that side of things that subsidize the existence of those shows. So that's been changing in the last, you know, 5 to 10 years in a big way. I mean, a lot of the money that a show like Ben 10 makes on the back end is all about merchandising and licensing the products that go with the show. So as that model's changed as well, you know. Now I'm not quite sure how it affects things beyond, you know, action figures and toys and sort of more children's merchandise. But I can't imagine that it's not more widespread than that market, you know. So how things are merchandised has gotten kind of wonky. And you know, it's more like I feel like we're in a period of like we don't know where it's going to land. Same with the you know, WGA and SAG, what we're dealing with there. We don't know what the future is going to look like, and we're trying to predict it as best we can and cover our ass basically. So, you know, it's for creators, it's all about how to get the work out there and what's going to subsidize it, what's going to facilitate it, what's going to broadcast it. You know, those to me are the core issues creatively that we're dealing with. So, I mean, yes, there's been evolution in the animation side of things, but definitely in a different way than what the strikes are really all about.
You know, I remember when the Green Lantern series was on Cartoon Network, and all the adults raved about it. But I'm really glad you pointed out that a big component of earning the money back is through merchandise.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's as simple as good as the Green Lantern series was, it didn't sell the toy.
Yeah.
And that's you know, kind of the main component of that series. I mean, like have other shows like when you were doing for Marvel, the Avengers series. Was there a line connection?
Yeah, there was, and to my knowledge, I mean, it sold okay. It, you know, the issue with the Marvel things is that there's so many different iterations and so many merchandising iterations that they kind of, there's a dilution that goes on that kind of prevents any one iteration to rise above the others. I mean, obviously, when the movies are peaking, that's the iteration that is the most prevalent. That's the merchandise that sells. But in between movies, it's kind of like a lot of things percolating. You know, the comic book licenses, the toy licenses, the animation versions, and then like maybe like the live action TV versions, but nothing that dominates and really blows out the door, you know.
Okay. B. Graham has a question regarding Zod. He says Dan McDade seems like such an inspired pick. for an artist on Zod with he in mind as the book was conceived?
Well, I mean, you know, I maybe if I'm going to tell tales out of school, I might as well tell them. Dan had not done any work for DC mainstream. He'd done a little bit for what was the I think the Dying Days, or the way he'd done stuff with the Hill House line. A couple little shorts here and there, I think, but in terms of mainstream DC superheroes, he was an unknown quantity. I brought Dan to them and said, I think this is the perfect guy. I think this is who we need. And I know he's right for the material. I know he loves the material. And, you know, enthusiasm goes a long way. It's just a bonus that he's mega talented and a great artist. But I've known Dan and worked with him off and on for the last 10 years. So, you know, I wanted somebody that I could collaborate with, that I could communicate with, and that we felt like we were on the same page. And that's definitely been the case. And, you know, when you can help things like that along and bring an artist to the table that the folks at DC get excited about, then everybody's life gets easier, you know, much, much easier. So at this point, we're just starting, the ride has just begun on the creative side. I've written and he's drawn. There's a backup intro sort of prologue story that shows up in December in Action Comics. That's done already. So we're seeing things sort of been, you know, the visions being executed, and it's really great. It's really cool to see him draw these characters, and yeah, I agree. An inspiring choice. Luckily, it was my inspiration.
You've always had a great eye for art. I think Tom Scioli, I would have known about him if it wasn't for Godland. You know?
Yeah.
Ashley Wood back in the day, Romantic Kafka. I don't remember who your artist was on Wildcats 3.0.
It was Dustin NeGuyen. It was his first kind of big book.
And
he went on to do, you know, be a big Batman artist, and you know, he's he's great.
You know, am I remembering correctly? Did you recently do another thing like in your library of creator art? Other stuff.
He was the artist on All America Comics.
Right.
Yeah. Reunited, John, and it feels so good.
Peaches, are you Peaches or Herb in that?
No, I'm Herb. Definitely, I'm Herb.
That's awesome. All right. Let's see. All right. Speaking of 3.0, Wes wants to know, you loved your run at Wildstorm. Was curious how you look back on the series, given how the view of corporations has certainly changed over the years.
I mean, I think that there were certain things about that series that turned out to be kind of prescient in comic books. A lot of that stuff was sort of, you know, picked apart and used by other writers in other series. I mean, that's fairly obvious. In terms of like the wider culture, like, you know, I wasn't trying to predict anything. It was more speculative science fiction. And, you know, what would the world be like if it was not, it was less about the corporation as it was what the corporation was capable of doing. What kind of reach they had, that global reach. I mean, I think that the only prescient thing that came out of it that really existed is the corporation as sort of replacement for nations and countries. I mean, you know, corporations are the global village that we're talking about now. It's not, I mean, the connectivity of the world is due to corporate, you know, interests and in some cases corporate greed. You know, it's not about countries and continents and, you know, borders anymore. Corporations cross borders in ways that nothing else can. So, you know, I look back on that series and I think that's kind of where we were headed with it. And that is kind of where things have gone. I mean, ours was a much more optimistic take than sort of the more pessimistic that I see sort of in the world now. Because my whole idea was the corporation as superhero. You know, if a corporation with their power and their reach was acting for altruistic purposes, what would that be like? You know, And I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. That's because, corporations act on one instinct, which is making money. That's right.
Absolutely.
It will always be and will never change.
I hear you. It's so funny. Bye, you're leaving Disney. And everyone's like, oh no, our patron saint is gone. And Chapek does what he does with Disney. Iger comes back. It certainly is one of these villains in these writers and actors strike. And by the way, this is John. Show. I don't want to implicate. Future.
I mean, I think that I tend to look at these guys in one of two ways, and it could go back and forth. One is that everything that's happening is they're kind of falling into these things, and they don't know what they're doing. It's all just a blind man with his cane, or they are the most Machiavellian three-dimensional chess players you will ever meet. But I kind of think it's more the first.
I agree.
I think these guys are a lot more reactionary than they are proactive.
They created streaming, as a new revenue stream, and really didn't step back and see the big picture. And again, it was a need in some cases because of COVID and the loss of the theater during COVID. Where our content is stacking up. And we need to get that stuff out there. So let's do this. And also, let's go further and do not only new theaters, but also nuance. And I've said this before, where the viewing habits of the audience was already on this Netflix success and Amazon Prime on this track of, I don't need to see it in the theater. I'll wait a few months, even 6 months or whatever, and it'll show up on streaming and cable and the like. Well, now the shelf life of a movie is maybe 8 weeks. If it's a hit. And again, they realizing the finite population. And it's like only so many people are going to want to subscribe to your service. And now they're I don't think they realize what they were creating. They're creating for themselves.
Well, I don't know why they don't see the history of these things. Everything is basically a technology that emerges, peaks, and declines.
Yes.
And anyone who thinks that, just look at the DVDs on our shelves now. There was a time when the DVD basically led the industry, the entertainment industry. VHS, for Christ's sakes, all these things, they come and they go. And why they didn't think that streaming would be the same way, or anything, TV, anything is the same way. It's just about how well are you going to predict when it's going to peak and when it's going to fall off. It's a game that nobody seems to know how to play. So instead of trying to play it well, they just pretend that it's not every new thing. They think, oh, this is it. This is the new reality. There's no such thing as a new reality. There's just the latest phase that we're in.
The problem, though, is in previous eras, you had the 78. Then you had the album, the long-playing album. Then you had the 45. And then you had the cassette. And then you had the CD.
Yep.
So each iteration would be replaced by another that they could lean into. But I think that with the problems of them deciding we don't want to make this media anymore. And now it's more ethereal, it seems. I hear what you're saying about the various problems in the past. The last writers' strike was about DVDs, and there was no verbiage in the WGA agreement to cover payment for DVDs. Well, now that's out there, and here we are with. It's like, how do you quantify a first view versus multiple views? As you know, the studios and the streamers, they've got the data. They don't want to share it, but they know who's watching, often they're watching, and the like, and also the reduction of connection, where again, because of the old models where you had international syndication and local syndication, you make a show like Grey's Anatomy, ABC fronts them, or whoever is producing the show fronts them the money. Yeah, well, we get money back in syndication when it reruns local stations and all the different. But that business is going away. It blew my mind a month ago when I'm reading the Bob. Something maybe Disney will sell ABC, and now you see the value or lack of the major networks. And Joe, I think this was a business that ran business as usual since the late 40s.
Yeah. What I find interesting, though, and I like your sort of an analogy with the album thing, from '78 to out. But what I'm always interested in is how art intersects with these arcs, because if you think about music, it started with something that could play one song. Now we're back to, when it comes to Spotify, it's all about the one song again. That's very interesting to me. So I like to see how those things track in other mediums and other art forms. How does it adapt to the technology? Does it go back to an older form and put the onus on, in the case of music, the one song? I mean, people still make albums, but the consumer online and getting their songs through Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff, they're interested in the one song, which in the days of the '78 was all you got, was the one song. So that's very interesting to me, how that tracks,
Agreed. I also think that digital, as far as comics, obviously has made whatever level of, and I can say as a consumer, I prefer the convenience of digital, and also that I'm not loading my shelves with more product. But it is interesting. I know Frank Presents and Bad Idea are just doing. Oh, I guess Bad Idea recently has decided to get into digital. But I know with Frank Presents, I've talked to the deal about this, and Solange Thomas, and with Frank. And they're like, we don't want digital. And what are your feelings on your digital or paper?
Well, I mean, I don't have anything against digital comics or the digital delivery system, except in the sense that as a guy making comics, it sometimes it comes to my head. If I'm writing something and I'm thinking of something like a double page spread, in a comic, in a physical copy, how that plays out. I can't predict on a phone or a screen or how that's going to work. So it's the mechanics of it that still kind of vex me as a creator, to be honest. And I've found that I'm a lot more judicious with my double page spreads in my books because of that component. I think that there's probably, look, if not, on the up and up, there's probably some illegal downloading going on of, bootlegging of digital comics. That's fine, whatever. Even for that audience, I want them to have the reading experience that they're meant to have. So that's more what I think of when it comes to digital comics is the presentation of the material, how it has to be adapted. Because I remember the first kind of digital comics that I would look at, where they would try to take you where they wanted you to go, the guided tour of a page.
Yes.
Well, I find that to be ridiculous. That's a lack of control as a creator that I did not want to give up.
Yes.
Because I'm dealing, as a comic book maker, you're dealing with panels, pages, spreads, and then issues, collections, omnibuses. I mean, those are the format parameters that you go into it, learning when you're trying to apply your craft. So with the digital aspect, it's yet another element that I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around. I mean, I've done things that are the vertical scroll, and I understand that, but to me, that's not the same comic book language that I've learned for the last 40 years.
I'm so with you, Joe. And I think both creators and publishers are still trying to figure that out. And I remember, and I'm going to use my fingers to everybody, but I'll describe it for the audio audience. When digital first came out, it was before the iPad. And you were dealing with your cell phone screen the size of a baseball card. And that was literally, as you say, page spreads, or even a single page, one image. It loses impact when it's on a screen so small. And that was my conversation with people that were playing with comics. And it's like, the double page spread, does it have a place in this future or that we're now dealing with? So no, I absolutely agree with you. And there's that thing about and as you see with guys, it's the readers' participation with the art. We have, with our choices, it's our eyeballs that are deciding what time we're looking at and at what length of time for them to impact in a very organic versus swipe.
Yeah, I mean, comic books are a very tactile medium, I feel like. And if it loses that, that's a significant loss in the experience. So, I don't like to think of myself as somebody that would, bury their head in the sand when it comes to new technology. I have my Luddite moments, but I don't want to give up the language that I've learned and tried to get better at over the course of my career. I want to still have access to those tools, and those tools involve a physical artifact.
I get it. Absolutely. B. Graham agrees with us. As a primarily digital reader on a tablet, double page spreads, while beautiful, can be an awkward pan from left to right. Single page splashes are more effective in this example.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, John, remember the old when movies would be broadcast on TV, on commercial TV, they do the pan and scan, which drove filmmakers nuts. They'd see their films, in these cropped, frames, and electronically scan to try to find the relevant information in the frame that they would show on TV. And it's the same thing with digital comics in those instances. It drives me nuts,
Absolutely, man. I'm so with you. All right, more questions from my Patreon followers. Duncan wanted to know your thoughts on Automatic Kafka. That was a great short series you did in the Wild Fun Talk launch in the early 2000s. The art by Ashley Wood was great. It's a shame there's no collected edition. Is that material coming back to you?
Now that I'm sort of back at DC, I'm having those kind of thoughts of the things that I've done that have not been collected. It's a weird thing. I mean, what they decide to collect. I mean, some things are obvious, some things are not so obvious. So as I get sort of closer to the company, as I'm doing this series and hopefully other work for them, maybe, I mean, I'd love to see not only Automatic Kafka get collected, but The Intimates, which is a great series I did with Giuseppe Camuncoli, been collected, and I don't know why, because just from an art point of view, those things deserve to be sort of permanently in print. Ashley Wood's art's amazing, Camo's art was amazing in The Intimates, and so for that reason alone, and those guys have obviously gone on. I mean, Ash was already kind of well known, but Camo went on to do all kinds of recognized Spider-Man, Batman, all kinds, and he's still doing it. So it's not like I don't think it wouldn't sell. So your guess is as good as mine. But now that I'm sort of back at DC, I'm going to be in there swinging and trying to convince them to maybe do something.
At the very least, would you be interested in, if they don't want to publish it, would they give you the right back? Because especially things like Kafka, was something that it was, as I remember, wasn't really tied to the Wildstorm universe. Maybe it was. I'm misremembering.
No, it wasn't tied to anything so tightly. Listen, I tried with Automatic Kafka, and they wouldn't sell it to me.
Interesting. Because
They
I would
wouldn't-
assume, not to spend your money, but I would assume that you might be in a position to put out yourself.
Well, I mean, it's it was sort of like, I think that DC went through a short period, and luckily some of my friends actually benefited from it, where they got certain properties back into their possession. But that was a short window, and I think when the Discovery merger happened, it became more of a closed shop in terms of IP retention. Even if they're not going to use it, they don't want anybody else to have it. It's IP is the new gold in entertainment, and it always was, but now it's obvious that that's what it's all about.
Yeah, they finally wised up.
Yeah,
I'm with you. No, I get it, man. Yeah, well, that's why, again, I mean, that's why for whatever 10 cents Word Balloon is worth, I'm glad I own it,
I hope they put it out. I mean, I don't, I think the work has value. It's been so long that it almost has historical value. Like, look what comics in the early aughts look like, folks,
Joe, it was that kind of stuff that really got my attention, was your creator-owned stuff that you were putting out there, and continue to, even now with Junior Baker and the like. So I hear you, man. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, Dave Ferguson said he loved Wildcat. Any hints to where the story was going? Because your run was cut short.
Yeah, I mean, it was. It's been a while. I thought about it recently. It was going to get more. I think where we were going would have been problematic for the Wildstorm universe, because we were headed in a direction that would have affected all the books in the line. Because what we were headed was so big. I mean, it was. I think anybody who read that series could kind of see the breadcrumbs we were leaving, that the Halo Corporation was going to get bigger and more influential and more global and world culture altering. So it was, we were going to try to take it to the mountain. I mean, that's what those kind of books are for, is to try to take an idea and push it as far as you could push it. And so, that was the sort of the general plan for Wildcats 3.0, is to really take the Jack Marlowe character and see how far he could be pushed as a figurehead for this sort of global movement that he was trying to do. It was almost without getting too heavy-handed about it, it was almost like a Jesus type story. Here's the central figure of our times that's going to define culture and how we live and how we view the world, how we view ourselves for the next few centuries or the next few millennium. That's the ambitions that we had for that series. I mean, it was probably overly ambitious. It's one of those things where, in historical hindsight, the fact that it was sort of cut off at the knees gives it more of a legend than possibly the implementation of those plans would have given it.
Sure.
So I have no regrets. Let's just put it that way. I'm happy to. Anybody who asks, I'm happy to kind of, give this speech and say what we wanted to do. But I think what I just said, for anybody who liked that series and read that series, gives them just enough to imagine what it would have been like to see that play out. That would be hard to compete with, So I'm happy not to.
I understand. I can think of other books like that too.
Yeah.
Ended prematurely, and the story in our heads were probably a lot more, detailed and interesting than what you could have come up with on your own. I understand.
There were, I think, 7 issues of Thriller that were done by Robert Warren Fleming and Trevor Von Eaton, the guys who created the book. But in my head, I've spun out probably about another 24 based on those 7 issues. I loved that series so much when I was a kid. And that's what those lost classics that's their role they play in the sort of the wider comic book culture. So I have a few of those. I'm proud to have them.
I'm with you, man. No, Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson's Manhunter run. You know, that's
Perfect
another one
example.
like that. Yeah, you know, again, old fart. That's why I go to the 70s. You're right. Or Wasteland.
Yeah.
God, I loved Wasteland. And yeah, you're right. It's no, there's plenty of this. Priest with the Crew.
Yeah, I love The Crew. I thought that series was stellar, so good. So I mean, those kind of projects are some of my favorites in the whole landscape of things. You know, Mike Barron's Sonic Disruptors, unfinished maxi series from the late '80s from DC. I love that series. I have no clue what it was about, but I loved it. You know.
I hear you, man. That's excellent. Oh God. Well, Joe, I'm sure people are tired of hearing me do the Lou Gehrig echo thing. And I don't, you know, but please, again, when you're talking, there's no echo. So is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I mean, it just got announced. I'll talk a little about Dutch. The Dutch is an old Team Youngblood character that luckily is not owned by Rob Liefeld, so it's not part of this whole legal mess where he doesn't have access to his own characters anymore, which is a real shame. Dutch was created and owned by an artist named Chap Yeh. Great guy who actually worked on Ben 10 as a designer. So he graduated out of comics and went into animation, where he still is to this day. But he was gracious enough to let us take a hold of his character, bring him forward in real time. So the Zero issue is the prologue of a miniseries that will start early next year that will continue the story of Dutch 30 years post his heyday in the early Image years. That series will lead to another series, which has not been announced yet, but is, was I said in the press release for the Dutch Zero announcement, probably the most ambitious thing I've ever attempted at Image. And that I include all my creator-owned stuff in that list. This thing is a big, wild swing that we're having a blast taking. Anyone who reads Dutch Zero, which comes out in November, will see the seeds of these larger plans. They're plain as day, and we're not hiding anything in the actual story. So people who read this will have a sense of where this thing is going and where we're going to pick up with. You know, the Image shared universe that existed for about 4 or 5 years from when they started to about 96, 97. A lot of readers that are younger than me, that was their first shared universe experience as a comic book reader. And without giving too much away, we're trying to bring that back. Eric Stevenson and I have been talking for a few years now about how to restore that universe in a way that makes sense to the readers who experienced it in the early 90s and experienced it in a genuine way. They were 13, 14 years old and reading, you know, getting into comics for the first time and embracing that universe of characters: Spawn, Savage Dragon, Youngblood, Wildcats, Shadowhawk, Cyberforce. There was cohesion at the beginning. And it took a while, but it did kind of spin out of control for all kinds of reasons. But I think for some younger readers, they still hold in their hearts that shared universe shared universe concept. So Eric and I specifically, you know, we joke a lot and we say, you know, we learned all this stuff in the 80s reading comics from like Jim Shooter, and we have nowhere to implement this knowledge that we have. Well, we found a place that we can implement it, and that's what this project is all about. So we're pretty psyched about what's coming up next year, and hopefully the fans will come out and support it, because I honestly don't know how many of those early Image readers still are reading comics, still aware of what's going on in comics. They might have given them up, you know, they might have moved on to other things. But we're gonna it's a big swing. We're hoping it connects, you know.
That sounds great. And I know that Image 1.0 readers, I hear them on their and the excitement that they had for that first iteration of you know, the Image founder and stuff. You said the connectivity between all those books. So no, I can appreciate it.
I know they're out there. I just hope they know about this series. I mean, when it gets closer, I'll come back on. I'll beat the boards about it because it's one of the most fun things I've written in a while because it really taps into all the things that I loved when I was a kid, which was how these puzzles of disparate characters connect together and work together. It's what we grew up on, that language of superhero comics, and I'm always looking for avenues so I can keep speaking. And this is a big one.
Sure. And again, a lot of great group of characters, depending on who you're able to play with beyond Dutch. What interesting to say. So I'm with you. So that starts in November.
Yeah, 0 issues in November, and then early 2024, there'll be a Dutch miniseries that starts, and then that will lead into another series, which is the big play.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
All right. So long-term plans for this.
Big
very
time.
Cool. B. Graham, I wanted to know: are there any other characters at DC that you'd like to tackle?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is, if I was going to come back to DC and or Marvel, I'd want to do it in, joking with a friend of mine earlier, I wouldn't go back to DC to do, Ragman. I mean, I don't have anything against Ragman. It doesn't. The obscure characters are fun, but I recognize the marketplace that we're in. And, I'm not out to do my vanity projects at DC Comics. If I'm going to do something at DC, the reason I agreed to do the Zod series is because he has a pop cultural relevance that goes beyond the comics. I mean, the fact that DC is titling the series Kneel Before Zod is fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, that means they're aware of the cultural currency there. So beyond that, anything else that I write at DC or Marvel, if the opportunity arises, will probably be more well-known, more commercial stuff. I mean, not the fringe characters. As much as I love them, that's not for where I'm at in my career. It's not for me to do those books.
That's so interesting, Joe, because earlier today, I spoke to Kyle Starks.
Oh, yeah.
180 from a year where he sees the opportunity to add to the mythos of those C and D level characters.
Yeah.
But I still hear what you're saying. And you're doing your own, create your own stuff. I mean, again, we go back to America, and I'm forgetting the name. America's Best Comics?
Oh, America Vasquez, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But All American Comics and stuff. Where in that we saw ciphers that clearly represent your favorite superhero team. It's not too hard. That's even the lead character. There are elements of Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne in there.
Right.
Again, completely original idea. So no, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I've taken my swings at commercial characters like obviously I wrote Superman, I wrote the X-Men, but I realized looking back that when I did those characters, I was so young and so early in my career that I was still in sort of punk rock subversion mode, and I was more interested in subverting Superman on some level by making him a stated pacifist, or subverting the X-Men in some way that might not have been the most commercial choice I could have made. Having done that already, if I'm going to do a commercial character, I'm going to try to do it as commercial as possible and sort of as mainstream as possible. And what I bring to the table now is 20 years of knowledge and craft and skill, and hopefully an understanding of how to connect with the readers of those characters in a way that is fresh without bending it too hard.
I hear you, man. King Sport Cal says you look like the lead singer of Offspring circa mid-90s, and that's a compliment.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
All right, Joe. Well, I'm going to close down the echo chamber that unfortunately I'm stuck in. But I mean,
it's a good metaphor for the comic book business, John. The echo chamber.
yeah, self-reflective in the worst way. I completely agree, man. Oh God! But good news. We're about a month away from Peter Baker, the Righteous Baker, starting.
Yeah.
Final order closes on Monday the 28th. And lots more cool stuff. Neil Zod and Dutch among the things that are coming up. So way to go, John. And,
thanks, John. Thanks for having me. And I'll have when there's more to talk about, bring me back, and we'll do it sans echo.
Well, you can count on it, Joe, because truly, I'm so glad that we're talking again. We had a period where again, you were busy in animation.
Yeah.
And, and I'm not watching Generator X, and I'm not, and I'm thrilled to watch it.
That's right.
But I certainly was rooting for you guys throughout, and I'm so thrilled with the success you've had. But I'm also glad you guys got time to come back to comics and do the great work that you're doing. So,
John, it's my first love, and I can't imagine giving it up. And I'm thrilled to kind of come back with projects that I'm excited about, and hopefully readers will be excited about. And let's get it on.
I hear you, man. Well, I look forward to our next conversation. I'll keep my eyes open, and I'll be, by all means, throw up the bat signal, and we'll do it again.
You got it, man.
All right, excellent. Joe Casey, everybody. Tomorrow I'm talking to Brian Bennett. Hopefully the echo won't be there. I don't know what the hell's going on. But and then Friday I'm talking to Mike Grell. I'm going to record it, and I'll present it later this week. And then also, I've been very fortunate. The people at Dublin Comic Con have been very generous with their content, and they are having conversations on the other side of the Atlantic. And I'm happy to present those as well. So that's going to be kind of the flavor of the closing days of August. We're wrapping things up, but more great stuff coming. I hope you'll join us for that. Until next time, stay safe, echo free, stay healthy.